After my last video on Kanteisho, I received a question from one of the viewers asking if that's what a Hozon blade looks like, what does a Juyo blade look like? Well, just to recap, as far as NBTHK papers, there are 4 different levels or tiers of Kanteisho that are issued by the NBTHK. Starting from the lowest, you have Hozon, and then second tier is Tokubetsu Hozon, third tier is Juyo, the fourth tier is Tokubetsu Juyo. So what that means is Hozon is worthy of preservation. The word Tokubetsu means especially. So the second tier, Tokubetsu Hozon, especially worthy of preservation. Above that, you have Juyo, and Juyo means that the sword is considered to be important. And what that means is important in terms of artistry, important to the history of the Japanese sword. So it may represent some important historical reference, it may be a rare example of an inscription, or it may be an unsigned blade that is especially well preserved that shows us what a healthy example of that individual looked like. And then again, taking that same word, Tokubetsu, you have Tokubetsu Juyo, which is the highest tier of papers that are issued by the NBTHK. As far as what a sword with Juyo Kanteisho looks like, it could look like anything. You have swords that are yari and naginata, tanto, wakizashi, katana, tachi that have received Juyo Token Kanteisho. So you just need to consider that if you're seeing a sword that has that level of papers, it has gone above the pre-qualification of saying that the sword is worthy of preservation and going further to say that this is a sword that is in some way important and significant in terms of the history of the craft. So all of that said, I'm going to show an example of a blade that has Juyō Token from one of the earliest sessions. So this is from session 11, very early in the process. Now we're in the 70s. And this is a blade that has received Juyo attribution to Kinju. Kinju is one of the 10, said to be one of the 10 famous students of Masamune. He and Kanayuji were judged to be the founders of the Mino tradition. Mino tradition being one of the 5 of the Gokaden. And his work is, of all of the 10 students of Masamune, of all of the Masamune Jutetsu, probably the most difficult to pin down and say this is what a Kinju looks like. They can range from pieces that are more Soshuden, so more following the work style of Masamune, to blades that show more of that emerging Mino tradition that you're seeing with Shizu Kanayuji, and then later into Naoi Shizu, and then Shigaseki, and then the Mino school. And now this is a blade that I would say is closer to the Soshuden, so closer in style to the early Soshu school and reflects the work style of Masamune in a couple of respects. One, the hamon is nie deki with a lot of hataraki, a lot of activity in the hamon. I know it's going to be challenging for the camera to focus during the video, but you have a midade, so kind of a random patterning of nie-based activity, crystalline activity in the blade. And also the horimono, or carving in this, which is something that is cited as one of the characteristics of Kinju, has various Buddhist elements. So you have a vajra handled at the bottom. I talked before in the previous video about bonji. These are Sanskrit characters that represent different bodhisattva. And then this is a less common horimono to see, and this is a type of stand or altar in Buddhism as well. And in addition to having NBTHK Juyo Kanteisho, the blade also was evaluated by Tanabe Sensei. Tanabe Sensei was the former head researcher of the Sword Museum, and he upheld that judgment, Noshu Kinju, so Mino Kinju. The format of his Saigaki, he'll have the attribution as the lead-in. If the blade passed Juyo, he will either add the notation or update with the notation if the blade comes back to him after passing at the Juyo level at Shinza. We have the Nagasa, we have the length of the blade, and then the date and signature of Tanabe himself, and then he will go through and provide commentary on the blade to say this is ubu mei, so it's unshortened and unsun blade, and he'll start talking about some of the history of the swordsmith and some of the specific attributes, like the fact that he, alongside Kinju, were the early founders of Mino, and you'll see the character Masamune here is one of the Masamune Jutetsu, and then he continues with commentary on the workmanship. So, again, just wanted to share an example of one particular piece that passed at the Juyō level. I have a few others here with me that I will create some video content for, and for anybody interested in Mino, it's interesting to see a blade by one of the co-founders of the entire tradition as well. So thank you very much, and I will update with more video content soon.